Greetings, my friends. Evangelist Joey Bellmore here once again with another Signs of the Times report. And today is December the 17th, 2015. We're going to be looking back at some of the events that occurred over the past week just to do a fresh update here. And we're going to start, as we always do in these Earth Changes Signs of the Times reports, with the earthquakes around the world, and I got a lot to get to because I had been really busy this week and I hadn't had a chance to do another update. So we're kind of going to cram a lot of information in this particular report here. So bear with me. I'm going to kind of try and fly through it as fluently as possible, but also for the sake of time, I don't want to spend too much time on any one specific thing. Just kind of go over all the signs of the times in this particular aspect in regards to the earth changes. And so we'll start with the earthquakes. As I said, of course, we had reports of a magnitude 5.3 earthquake jolting Bengkulu, Indonesia. There was also a 5.2 magnitude earthquake that struck over in Ilocos Sur in the Philippines. And we also had reports of a series of earthquakes shaking Mindanao in the Philippines. As it says here, a series of earthquakes struck in some parts of Mindanao on December the 10th. However, the various provincial disaster risk reduction and management councils said areas reported no damage or casualties, so that's good. It goes on to talk about how the swarm was involving magnitudes of 3 plus. They had a magnitude 4.6. So it goes on to say here that, as it mentions right here, the state agency said the series of earthquakes were all tectonic in origin, symbolizing tectonic movement in the plates of the earth. And it says here they were caused by movements along a local fault in the said areas in the report. So we see more geological movement. And when you're talking about tectonic plates movement and some of the strong seismic activity that can generate, when I see something like this where there's a series of earthquakes in a particular area, usually it's a sign of a larger geological event to come. I mean, that remains to be seen. So I'm sure there can be adjustments, and then that large event can occur so deep that it may not be felt entirely on the surface. So it can happen any way, but nonetheless, just more signs of the times as the seismicity and earthquake activity globally continues to increase. And speaking of earthquake swarms, we see in this report here from KTVB7 News, stating that another earthquake swarm shook the east-central Idaho area. As it says here, more than 40 small earthquakes have been recorded in east-central Idaho this week, in what experts say is another earthquake swarm in the region. So it goes on to talk more about that. And it mentions here, University of Idaho research geologist William Phillips says scientists aren't sure if the current earthquake swarm could lead to something bigger. Well, usually when you see swarms occur, it's a sign of a larger geological event to come somewhere along the line. So, I mean, it remains to be seen what the future holds, but the swarms continue over there. And apparently, seismic activity has intensified dramatically in Azerbaijan as the country faced about 7,000 earthquakes, apparently, in 2015. And it says here, magnitude of more than 80 earthquakes ranged from 3.1 to 5.9, and tremors of 17 were felt, according to the Seismological Service Center reports. So again, we see more areas of the globe experiencing intensified seismicity. And all this talk about earthquake swarms, and we haven't even mentioned Oklahoma. Well, here we go. This is a report talking about how Oklahoma has reported a massive surge in earthquakes in 2015. As it says here, as 2015 nears its end, 850 earthquakes of magnitude 3 or greater have stirred the state of Oklahoma, compared to 584 of the same magnitude in 2014 and 109 in 2013. The trend is clear. Earthquakes are on the rise. And this is a trend we're seeing globally However, it is in specific areas. The increase is more intensified than other areas, as certain areas are more earthquake prone than other areas, and so you see this dramatic increase there. It goes from 109 in 2013 to 584 in 2014, and now in 2015 it's at 850. It says here, while Oklahoma's spike in earthquakes has been heavily publicized, Jeremy Boak, director of the Oklahoma Geological Survey, said it's less widely known that the state has been taking steps toward combating the pattern of induced seismicity. Induced seismicity, they call it, maybe as a result of fracking and other things, but nonetheless, it's just more of the trend of the intensification of seismic activity around the world, and more signs of the times. As Jesus said, there would be earthquakes in diverse places. And just today, there was a 6.4 magnitude earthquake that hit off the southern Pacific coast of Mexico, and this is according to a report from the USGS, or the U.S. Geological Survey. And it says the quake was initially measured at 6.6, but has since been downgraded to 6.4. And so, as we always do in these videos, we'll do a live look-in at the latest earthquakes around the world, and I've got it at the only magnitude 4 or greater, just because, for the sake of time, and we're not going to look at every little swarm. But you see all the earthquakes here that were yesterday, that were 4 or greater. You see there were many. We had a 5.1 over in Tonga, and several magnitude 4s. And then today we've had many magnitude 4s as well. A 5.3 over in the Luzon, Philippines area. And of course we had the 6.5 as it's registered here in Chiapa, Mexico, off the coast over there. From seismicity now we're going to transition into geological events that are sometimes usually a result of some sort of seismic activity. But not in all cases. However, we're going to talk about sinkholes, and with this first piece, we see that a huge sinkhole is threatening to swallow homes in Ocala, Florida. And Florida is prone to sinkholes. We know that because of what that city is built on, and where it's situated in the geological makeup of that land out there. But it says here, a massive 60 by 50 foot sinkhole 15 feet deep opened up overnight in Ocala, Florida, and is threatening to swallow homes in the town's Oak Run neighborhood, according to the Marion County office. And it also mentions here that the investigators have found a 12-inch water main break, but since no one was present in the area when the sinkhole opened up, it's not possible to say if the sinkhole activity or the water main break occurred first. And that's what's going to happen as these seismic events increase as time goes on. We're going to see a lot of pipes bursting in the ground as the ground moves and shakes, and in some cases opens up and causes fissures and other things in sinkholes, as we see. So I'll link you up at that. There's video here talking about the... it's a news coverage talking about it, but they're also showing footage of this massive sinkhole, and it's pretty big, as you see here. So I'll be linking you guys up to that, so you guys can check it out if you wish in the description box below, in which I'll link you up with everything I show you in the videos as usual. Meanwhile, this report from the Oregon Live says that massive sinkholes and landslides endanger northwestern Oregon neighborhood. And it says here, 7 families in a cluster of hillside homes above the Tillamook River spent the past week watching the 2 roads they live on slip, buckle, and tangle into a slide of rocks, mud, and trees. It began Monday as a few little cracks on Burton Hill Road just outside Tillamook, but by Wednesday, the cracks had collapsed into a quarter-mile series of sinkholes and creeping mud that put their homes at risk, pushed a barn off its foundation, and left homeowners fearful of what will move next. And the thing is we have seen these events all along the West Coast in the California region. You remember that one where the mountains were moving into the ocean and the roads were buckling and the light posts were falling. I showed you footage on that in a previous report. I forget exactly where that was now. The name of the area is slipping me, but here we're seeing similar occurrences in many reports since then. And so you see some of the damage here. And if I were living in this home, I'd be a little bit worried or concerned. Not worried, but definitely concerned over this stuff. And obviously probably wouldn't want to stay living there with all this going on. And so I'll link you guys up with that as well. But we see sinkholes and landslides along the west coast of the United States, specifically in the California region. Still a common theme. And my prayers go out to the families affected, because it's probably not easy to deal with something like this. So thank God no one was injured. And we'll move on here to more sinkholes and landslides reported, with this next piece talking about how a large sinkhole opened up over on a beach in Queensland, Australia, in a place called the Spit. And pretty weird name, but you can see a shot of it here. It says a large sinkhole has opened up at the northern end of the Spit about 5:30 p.m. this afternoon. The large hole, about 5 meters by 7 meters in size, is surrounded by orange cones to warn beachgoers of possible danger. It is possible to get close, but caution is advised, as they say. So you can see shots of that sinkhole there. And in Washington, we see that a sinkhole closed a portion of the road a portion of South Bank Road near Elma, and it says that it may take them several weeks to repair this. And so it mentions how the sinkhole comes right up to the road, leaving about a 20-foot drop-off from the shoulder. So another sinkhole opening up over there in Washington. And another piece here talking about, ironically, a beach that is swallowed by the ocean. And it mentions that this beach in California, called Carlsbad State Beach, is basically gone. And it mentions here an interesting weather phenomenon occurred on the west coast of the U.S., and this is all along the west coast, specifically in the areas of California. And they say here, whether it was caused by El Nino or not, the Carlsbad State Beach was almost completely swallowed by the ocean. And so let's see here. You can see here the footage of the place now, which I assume used to be a beach that extended out for people to enjoy. And you can see bits and pieces still coming off as these tides roll in and knock chunks off. And so pretty crazy stuff. Moving right along here, we're going to talk about volcanic activity around the globe now. And this report here is talking about the Canloan volcano over in the Philippines and how it spewed an ash cloud. And there's shots here of this eruption. And in this report, we see that experts are warning of a looming threat of volcanic disasters over in Auckland. And you can see here this woman here, and she's got all the areas on the map pointed out there. The piece goes on to talk a little bit more about that, but it says here that they are also reminders, the past events that have happened, of the city's fiery history and looming threat of future disaster. So they're warning about this, and it mentions here that while currently dormant, the field is expected to erupt again from a new site within potentially as little as a few hundred years or less. So I'll link you up to this piece talking about how there's a looming threat of volcanic disasters over there in Auckland. Meanwhile, intense, more frequent explosions and new lava flows have occurred at Guatemala's Fuego volcano, according to this report. As it says here, another phase of strong, increased activity was observed at the Fuego volcano in Guatemala on December the 14th, according to reports from volcanodiscovery.com. And it says here, frequent, intense explosions and ash plumes accompanied with loud shock waves marked the 13th paroxysmal episode of the 2015 volcanic activity. And Mexico's Colima volcano is at it again. As we see here, a triple eruption of ash and smoke has been recorded over there. As it mentions, Mexico's Colima, or fire volcano, roared to life, spewing columns of ash and gas into the sky early on the 14th of December. And so, again, we see more volcanic activity. Over in Russia, we see a volcano by the name of in the region named the Kamchatka region, has spewed ashes covering a local village with a thin layer of soot and ash. And it says that the ash cloud from the Shivaluk volcano reached 6,500 meters above sea level, the ministry said in a statement. The volcano is 3,283 meters high. Winds carried ashes nearly 50 kilometers east of the volcano, reaching the village of Kamchatka, where a 1 millimeter layer of ash fallout was registered, the report said. It says the incident presented no hazards to local residents' health, so that's a good thing, but nonetheless, we're seeing the increase of volcanic activity globally continuing on. And just for a quick live look in at the worldwide scene of volcanic activity, here we see all the volcanoes that are active around the world right now, and we'll see that those which have yellow color are just experiencing levels of unrest. The ones that are labeled orange are experiencing minor activity or a warning of an imminent eruption, and the red are those that are in full out eruption. And we're seeing a lot of red. And if I were to zoom in, oops, wrong way here. But if I were to zoom in, you would clearly see that there are much more underneath, because you can't really see them all when I'm zoomed out like that. However, you can see that there are significant amounts of earthquake as well, but volcanic activity going on globally. So I'll link you up to that if you want to check it out yourself. It's a really cool interactive map over on volcanodiscovery.com. And even if you want, you can click on specific volcanoes. And, ironically, I click on Mexico's Colima volcano, which we've been covering extensively in previous reports, but it's a nice resource. So anyone who's interested in this type of thing, it's a cool website to stay up to date on the latest events. Moving on to weather-related phenomena in regards to the Earth changes, and here we see in this report that southern Australia was actually hit with 140,000 lightning strikes overnight. And this was back on December the 7th. And more records being broken here as we see that this powerful storm, the strike over in Alaska, was apparently to rival the strongest on record. And it says here that the intensity of a storm is measured by the central pressure, with lower pressure equating to a stronger system. And according to their measurements, this could be the strongest storm on record over there. And over in Washington, over in Battleground, we see that a rare winter tornado caused some damage over there. And this is a piece talking about that. Speaking of tornadoes, we've seen this report here from New Zealand, in which a tornado has apparently whipped through a Canterbury area down there. And it says here that a tornado whipped through Canterbury this afternoon, while heavy rain and lightning strikes caused flooding and small fires. And it says here the fire service said it had been stretched to the limit, with calls about several small fires caused by lightning, trees crashing down on power lines, and flooding. It says that the storm left more than 5,000 homes in southwest Christchurch without power. And more of these winter tornadoes reported here, as this piece from the Daily Mail talks about how rare winter tornadoes touched down in East Texas, surprising residents and damaging up to 50 homes. So this tornado also destroyed a bridge and injured 2 people, so thank God no lives were lost. But here we see some footage of this thing, and it was pretty big. And so multiple reports of winter tornadoes in the Texas area is certainly a rarity at this time of year. And you can see the footage here. I'll go ahead and link you up to it. In other news, we see that on the Sunday, the 13th of December, strong winds actually blew a train right off its tracks. And you can see here that it's like an overpass over a road, and the train must have been blown right off there by a wind gust. And it says here, the Texas Police Department shared a photo on its Facebook page Sunday morning after winds blew a train off the tracks as it crossed the highway. Thank God no cars were caught underneath that. That could have been very tragic. And it says here, an update says it will take at least 48 hours to upright the 64 rail cars. Police advised drivers to avoid Loop 287. And it goes on to talk about how that's what I was looking for. How the cars were believed to be empty when a gust of wind took them off the tracks around 7 a.m. So praise God that these cars were actually empty and there wasn't human beings inside that could have been seriously harmed in this event. Meanwhile, more than 700,000 people in the central Philippines fled to safer areas for fear of giant waves, floods, or landslides as Typhoon Melor slammed into the archipelago nation on Monday, according to officials. So we see more powerful storms raging across the globe. And you can see here there's a report of this storm actually making landfall, and this is a shot from a disaster of a previous typhoon, I believe, that struck the area. And you can see that these people who live in these vulnerable areas, some of the things they have to deal with. Imagine the cleanup that needs to be had over there. And my prayers go out to the people that were affected by this storm. But it goes on to mention how Melor is a very compact typhoon, so that will prevent its most devastating impacts from extending too far from its center. So that's a good thing, but it says while Melor will not slam onshore as a super typhoon as once feared, it still poses dangers to lives and property. So there are warnings in place as this storm rages across the area over there in the Philippines. And of course, my prayers are with the people of the Philippines at this time. According to this piece, 2015 has been the worst wildfire season in United States history, according to a report from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. As it says here, the nation is closing in on its worst wildfire season in recorded history, with nearly 9.8 million acres already burned, the equivalent of Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and part of New Hampshire going up in flames. And they go on to say here that while it hasn't eclipsed it yet, it certainly will surpass the totals that of the records that have previously been set. Another indication of the signs of the times, as we're going to experience a lot of climate chaos among all the other events that will accompany the end times. And as the Bible calls it, Jeremiah said in chapter 30 that there would be a day that's coming that is great, so that none is like it. And in Daniel 12, we read that there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even to that time. And Jesus said in Matthew 24 that, for then shall there be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world, even to this time, nor ever shall be, except those days should be shortened, there should be no flesh saved. But for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened. And so we're going to see unprecedented disaster in the form of, many different ways. We're going to hear wars, violence, lawlessness, the moral collapse of society, if it isn't already here. It's, drought, famine, wildfires, economic collapse, earthquakes, and other natural disasters. We're going to see disease epidemics, plagues, and pestilences, the intensification of persecution of Christians. Of course, we're going to see the gospel of the kingdom preached to all nations as a witness. One of the other things we're going to see is the emergence of a 10-nation contingent that will institute a global government and religious system headed up by the Antichrist and the false prophet. But remember, that's why it's important that we discern the signs of the times. And remember that we're told in the scriptures, Jesus said in Matthew 24 that we not be troubled, because all these things must come to pass. In Luke 21, he said, when these things begin to come to pass, then look up and lift your heads, for your redemption draweth nigh. So we can look at these world events, and while they are kind of frightening in a sense of where this world is heading, we should not fear, because there's so much more than this life. And, as the scripture says, these things must come to pass. And they're a result of sin and a result of man's actions. Meanwhile, in Singapore, they had flash floods for a second day in a row, as 3 inches of rain fell in under 2 hours. And the piece says here, for a second day in a row, roads clogged up with traffic after heavy downpours triggered flash floods in several parts across the island this afternoon, and this was reported on December the 11th. We see here that heavy flooding is also still affecting Ireland as the Shannon River levels are rising. It says here parts of Ireland experienced more heavy flooding on December the 12th after more heavy rain battered the country. At the same time, water levels of the Shannon River system are still rising and are expected to peak over the next few days, according to the National Emergency Coordination Group's reports. And so it says an abundant amount of precipitation over the weekend of December the 12th triggered floods in the counties of Sligo, Leitrim, and the Dublin area, while parts of Western Ireland in the Shannon River basin suffered the worst hit. And you can see some of the damage of the flooding here in certain areas. This house here is just surrounded by water. And so pretty crazy stuff in some of these photos. I'll link you up to the piece so you can check it out if you wish. And here's a report talking about how down in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, dozens have been killed as more floods have hit the area. And it says here torrential rain between the 11th and the 12th of December has caused deadly floods and landslides in eastern and western parts of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. It says local news reports claim that 18 people have died in eastern South Kivu and 9 in western Bas-Congo provinces. So we see there 27 people have been officially ruled as dead and have lost their lives. And of course, deepest condolences and prayers go out to the families of the affected people. And we'll move on here to some more meteor sightings, if you will, as this piece talks about how a meteor fireball leaves a huge plume as it streaks across Swedish skies on the 14th of December 2015. And you see a shot of it here. It was pretty crazy. What I'm going to do is I'm going to link you guys up to it, but I'll play it for you here so you can see the thick plume that this thing was leaving in basically broad daylight, as you see here. Pretty crazy stuff. As you watch it burn up in the Earth's atmosphere here, and certainly looks like it's something that would make landfall. You can see the long streak across the sky, and great shots of this thing by whoever filmed it. Anyhow, I'll link you guys up. I'll also link you up to this footage here. There was some sky watchers out gazing at the skies while watching the Geminid meteor fireballs, and they happened to capture footage of multiple amount of meteors striking through the atmosphere in succession, which is a pretty cool footage. Nothing out of the ordinary. That's the Geminid meteor shower. And so I'll link you guys up to it. And over in Florida, in Brevard County, we had reports of a mystery fireball seen falling from the sky. And I don't believe this is a shot of that actual fireball. I believe it's just a shot of just a random picture for the report. But it says here, a mysterious fiery object falling from the sky was reported in Brevard County, prompting authorities to launch a search, officials said. Nothing was found after 911 callers reported seeing a fiery object falling to the ground. The calls were received about 7 a.m. Thursday with reports of the mysterious object striking the area near the Interstate 95 on-ramp on the southbound side of the Palm Bay Road. Palm Bay fire rescue crews and police searched the area but found nothing. A check with Melbourne International Airport also turned up no information about the mysterious object. News 6 partner Florida Today has reported on this, and that's where these facts come from. So they're actually asking anyone with information to call police. But pretty crazy stuff as this mystery fireball apparently actually struck the ground. Now I'm over on Energy News. I wanted to put this in here because I was reporting on this for years, talking about how Fukushima will have effects on the environment that last for years and years and years and years to come, and is basically unstoppable with what's already occurred there. And there's been a huge suppression of information, as we know, as anyone knows who's been following this. But according to a former official, he came out and said that Fukushima is unstoppable and that corporate journalists are withholding shocking information as huge amounts of radiation are pouring out still. And he goes on to quote, and this is his exact words, that it's a very serious situation for the Pacific Ocean. And the plant chief was saying that this is something that has never been experienced before and that we must invent new science for this unprecedented catastrophe. Another thing I have been following is the developments in regards to the Hosea 4:3 prophecy on the mass animal die-offs. The beasts of the field would perish and the fishes of the sea would be taken away. And we're seeing this continual trend of mass die-offs happening for multiple different reasons all over the globe, just increasing as there have been now 808 known and recorded mass death events in 95 countries or territories just in 2015 here. And that's pretty significant. And in this first piece here, we see that nearly 20,000 chickens had to be culled in Changhua due to the H5N2 bird flu virus. And it says here that a total of 18,810 chickens were culled on a poultry farm in central Taiwan's Changhua County late Thursday after it was confirmed that they had been infected with the highly pathogenic H5N2 avian influenza infection, officials said Friday. Officials first learned about the outbreak after a slaughterhouse in the country told the authorities on December the 7th that they had noticed unusual deaths among some of the chickens sent there. Okay, and it goes on to mention how investigations later found that the questionable chickens came from a poultry farm in Chenghua's Jutang Township, and that the owner of the farm had failed to report the unusual deaths in his flock. Over in Mobile Bay, Alabama, there was a widespread fish kill being reported. As it says here, a widespread fish kill is underway across Mobile Bay. It appears to be affecting primarily filter-feeding fish, such as menhaden, sardines, alewives, and shad. And when we read on, it says dead fish are present in the shallows and on the beaches on both sides of the bay, from Point Clear to Daphne on the eastern shore, and from Arlington Point south to Fowl River on the western shore. Dead and dying fish also dot the surface of the bay from one side to the other. And it goes on to mention here that as we read that they're not entirely sure what's causing it, and they are apparently still going to be looking into it. So I'll link you up to this, and you can check it out for yourself. And we'll move on to this next piece. Over in the Leyte in the Philippines, we see that there were reports of tons of dead fish and other marine animals washing ashore. As it says here, tons of different types of fishes and marine animals were washed ashore on Wednesday along the coast of Barangay Bacong and Babatnong and Leyte. And I probably mispronounced some of those. I really apologize for that. Goes on to say that this was according to television news reports on Saturday. And residents, it goes on to report that residents were surprised to see hundreds of dead fish floating near the shore during the high tide. It says officials said some 3 tons of fish and other aquatic animals have been washed ashore. And so it goes on to talk about this in more depth in the piece here, but we see the ongoing trend of apocalyptic mass die-offs continuing worldwide. This most recently here over in the Philippines. Meanwhile, we see this bird flu virus is not only affecting the multiple areas over in Asia, but apparently now this is continuing to spread in Europe, specifically in France. As it says here, 3 more outbreaks of the highly pathogenic avian influenza have been reported in France, bringing the total number of outbreaks to 13. It says in Landslides, an outbreak of the H5N9 strain of the Horseshoe was detected in a breeding flock over 3.5 million chickens, ducks, and guinea fowl. Goes on to say another H5N9 outbreak was found further south in Erosis, in a particular region that infected 1,500 breeding ducks. And finally, an H5N2 outbreak was also reported, in which a flock of 8,300 breeding ducks and 250 of the birds died, and the rest were destroyed. So thousands of birds have already died and been destroyed in these outbreaks, and a third outbreak of the low pathogenic avian influenza has also been reported. The H5N2 outbreak occurred they mentioned the region there, and apparently it affected a flock of 6,120 ducks, which were all destroyed. So we see this ongoing mass culling, which definitely plays into the Hosea 4:3 prophecy and the mass animal die-offs. As these signs of the times continue to unfold globally. In other disturbing news, we see that this report talks about how dozens of dead birds were washing up on the beaches in Mississippi over in the United States. And we see here that in southern Mississippi, it was a frightening sight along the coastline. First fish, now dozens of birds found dead on beaches in several coast cities. We got reports of several birds in the Gulfport area, and after speaking with the DEQ, they got several more birds in the Biloxi area. And it goes on to talk about how even in Long Beach, many species of birds have been found lifeless or clinging to life. Experts saying it all goes back to the unprecedented December red tide. That's what they're linking it to. Regardless of what they link it to, it's just more evidence of the ongoing trend of these mass animal die-offs, and so I'll link you up with that piece. And this last piece I'm going to finish off with touches on something I mentioned previously in the video here, the whole situation about Fukushima. And according to this journalist, they're quoted as saying, "Nobody even talks about Fukushima anymore. There's almost no more fish. The ocean is dying. It's terrifying. Government warns public to expect alarming increase in deaths along the west coast. Fish are just too hard to find." It goes on, more quotes saying that it's chaos below the surface over there. And according to officials, they are apparently preparing for the worst as this Fukushima unprecedented natural disaster continues to affect the Pacific Ocean specifically, but will have global effects as this trickle effect continues from this as I said, this unprecedented disaster over there, which is nothing more than just more signs of the times, my friends. And so I'm going to close on that, and I want to let you guys know that you can also connect with me on social media, on Twitter, which I don't use as much as Facebook, but you can also connect with me on Facebook. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel here. I'm going to close with that, my friends. This is Evangelist Joey Bellmore signing off. If you don't know Jesus Christ, I suggest you seek Him with all your heart today, because He says if you do that, you will find Him. And Jesus said that if you continue in His Word, that you will know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. God bless you guys today. Greetings, my friends. Evangelist Joey Bellmore here once again with another Signs of the Times report. And today is December the 17th, 2015. We're going to be looking back at some of the events that occurred over the past week just to do a fresh update here. And we're going to start as we always do in these Earth Changes Signs of the Times reports with the earthquakes around the world. And I got a lot to get to because I had been really busy this week and I hadn't had a chance to do another update. So we're kind of going to cram a lot of information in this particular report here. So bear with me. I'm going to kind of try and fly through it as fluently as possible, but also for the sake of time, I don't want to spend too much time on any one specific thing. Just kind of go over all the signs of the times in this particular aspect in regards to the earth changes. And so we'll start with the earthquakes. As I said, of course, we had reports of a magnitude 5.3 earthquake jolting Bengkulu, Indonesia. There was also it remains to be seen what the future holds, but the swarms continue over there. And apparently, seismic activity has intensified dramatically in Azerbaijan as the country faced about 7,000 earthquakes, apparently, in 2015. And it says here, a magnitude of more than 80 earthquakes ranged from 3.1 to 5.9, and tremors of 17 were felt, according to the Seismological Service Center reports. So again, we see more areas of the globe experiencing intensified seismicity. And all this talk about earthquake swarms, and we haven't even mentioned Oklahoma. Well, here we go. This is a report talking about how Oklahoma has reported a massive surge in earthquakes in 2015. As it says here, as 2015 nears its end, 850 earthquakes of magnitude 3 or greater have stirred the state of Oklahoma, compared to 584 of the same magnitude in 2014 and 109 in 2013. The trend is clear. Earthquakes are on the rise. And this is a trend we're seeing globally, all along seismic activity that can generate. When I see something like this where there's a series of earthquakes in a particular area, usually it's a sign of a larger geological event to come. I mean, that remains to be seen. So I'm sure there can be adjustments, and then that large event can occur so deep that it may not be felt entirely on the surface. So it can happen anyway, but nonetheless, just more signs of the times as the seismicity and earthquake activity globally continues to increase. And speaking of earthquake swarms, we see in this report here from KTVB 7 News, stating that another earthquake swarm shook the east-central Idaho area. As it says here, more than 40 small earthquakes have been recorded in east-central Idaho this week, in what experts say is another earthquake swarm in the region. So it goes on to talk more about that. And it mentions here, University of Idaho research geologist William Phillips says scientists aren't sure if the current earthquake swarm could lead to something bigger. Well, usually when you see swarms occur, it's a sign of a larger geological event to come. Somewhere along the line, 5.2 magnitude earthquake that struck over in the Ilocos Sur in the Philippines. And we also had reports of a series of earthquakes shaking Mindanao in the Philippines. As it says here, a series of earthquakes struck in some parts of Mindanao on December the 10th. However, the various provincial disaster risk reduction and management councils said areas reported no damage or casualties, so that's good. It goes on to talk about how the swarm was involving magnitudes of 3 plus. They had a magnitude 4.6. So it goes on to say here that, as it mentions right here, the state agency said the series of earthquakes were all tectonic in origin, symbolizing tectonic movement in the plates of the earth. And it says here they were caused by movements along a local fault in the said areas in the report. So we see more geological movement. And when you're talking about tectonic plates movement and some of the strong. However, it is in specific areas. The increase is more intensified than other areas, as certain areas are more earthquake prone than other areas, and so you see this dramatic increase there. It goes from 109 in 2013 to 584 in 2014, and now in 2015 it's at 850. It says here, while Oklahoma's spike in earthquakes has been heavily publicized, Jeremy Boak, director of the Oklahoma Geological Survey, said it's less widely known that the state has been taking steps toward combating the pattern of induced seismicity. Induced seismicity, they call it, maybe as a result of fracking and other things, but nonetheless, it's just more of the trend of the intensification of seismic activity around the world, and more signs of the times. As Jesus said, there would be earthquakes in diverse places. And just today, there was a 6.4 magnitude earthquake that hit off the southern Pacific coast of Mexico, and this is according to a report from the USGS, or the U.S. Geological Survey. And it says the quake was initially